Silence is safer. Speaking up comes at a cost. This is the Audacity Tapes, where women have chosen courage across cultures, continents, and systems of power. I'm Robin Jorgensen. Welcome to the conversation. Hello, everyone. Today's guest is Erin Mark. At 5 years old, she overheard a conversation that would change the course of her life. She learned she likely would not live to adulthood. But this conversation is about far more than illness. It's about survival, voice, self-trust, and what happens when a woman refuses to quietly accept someone else's verdict about her future. Erin, welcome to the Audacity Tapes.
Robin, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
I'm so excited. All right, so let's go back to a conversation that you overheard when you were 5 years old. Tell me about that conversation and what do you remember about it now in your body?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born, I'll set the stage, with a chronic terminal illness called cystic fibrosis. And doctors told my parents I wouldn't live past 18. And I was a very nosy child. So I was listening to my dad on a phone call one night, and he quietly said my life expectancy out loud on that call.
It's got chills.
Yeah. And at 5, you can count backward from 18. And in whatever way a 5-year-old can take in that information, I started to count backward. And I thought to myself, I must not have a lot of time here.
Keep going.
I was going to say, most kids in kindergarten are really dreaming, right, about their future. They want to be, doctors, nurses, teachers. They talk about, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's one of the most common questions we ask kids.
Right.
And for me, from that point on, I didn't think I would have a future or a job to aspire to. So I made this promise to myself at 5 that whatever time I had here, that I was going to do the best I can with what I had and leave this world better than when I found it.
Even at 5, you had the self-awareness to know that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So what was it like as a child to grow up with an expiration date on your future?
Yeah. A lot of joy, to be honest with you, and a lot of urgency.
Yeah.
It was joy and urgency went hand in hand for me. I didn't want to spend my life sad, scared, living in fear. And it's not to say that some days those emotions were front and center, but I wanted to choose joy. And I didn't want to live like every day was my last. I know a lot of people love that saying, and I actually hate it. I think we should live for tomorrow. Because if we live like every day is our last, what good are we to ourselves or to anyone else? And that's like how that urgency really came into place with that joy.
Yeah. Wow. So when we were talking last week, you said that Make-A-Wish showed up at your house, which is an amazing organization.
Incredible.
But for a little girl, that also means that everyone around you believes you're dying.
100%. And it was actually the day after I heard my dad on that call that Make-A-Wish showed up at our door. And I didn't fully understand what that meant for Make-A-Wish coming, but I was putting like 2 and 2 together.
Right.
And I knew I was sick enough to get a wish.
Right.
So most kids back then wished for Disney World. That was like preset, the default had been prearranged. You're going to Disney. But no one, the problem was, Robin, no one told me that. No one briefed me that this was happening. So this poor man leans over for Make-A-Wish and asks me if I could go anywhere in the world, where would I want to go? We had this like deep voice. I yell. Time was very exotic. I was a very exotic 5-year-old. The room went silent, as you can probably imagine.
Right.
People are horrified because it's supposed to be this amazing, magical moment. And I'm yelling Tahiti, and they're like, we have no airline miles for Tahiti, probably at Make-A-Wish. Like, what is wrong with this little girl? Who is this? And so the guy like sits for a minute, and then he's like nervously, clearing his throat, and he goes, "How about Disney World?" And I had a follow-up question. I was very inquisitive. I go, "Are there palm trees there?" The entire room was probably like, "Oh my God, thank God."
Right.
Yes, thank God there's a palm tree in Disney. And I said, "All right, well, sold." And the backstory is we were actually learning about palm trees that week in kindergarten.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical.
I was fascinated. I was from Massachusetts, never saw a palm tree in my life. And I go, "Oh my gosh, okay, well, Lisa, I don't know where I got Tahiti from, by the way. I have no clue at 5 where I pulled Tahiti from." But yeah, so I thought, well, I'll grudgingly accept the palm trees and at least to get to see my favorite princess, Cinderella,
Of course. That's a given. Yes.
a given. And, but I do remember thinking Tahiti would have to wait, but not too long, because that night before I knew I was
Yeah.
on limited time. And what's interesting, when I got to Disney, I saw my first palm tree. And every morning at the character breakfast, Cinderella saved a seat for me
Oh,
right
wow.
next to her. And, she didn't know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she knew I was a wish kid. She didn't know my prognosis. But I think as an adult now, or maybe this, blonde 20-year-old who was like, "Oh my God, this poor sick child who's like obsessed with Cinderella."
Right.
Really meant the world to me when I needed it the most, because for that trip, I wasn't the sick kid. I was just a little girl getting to have breakfast with her favorite princess every morning, with her saving me that seat.
Oh.
Yeah.
So as a kid, did you grow up planning for a future or surviving one?
I grew up planning
Yeah.
because
How
I
so?
think when you plan to survive, that it can take some things away from that joy and urgency. So my planning was that I was going to live for that tomorrow. And I thought, how can I impact as many people as I can for as long as I was going to be here? What was interesting was during my time as a kid and a teenager, I was on a lot of antibiotics, in and out of the hospital, had hours of treatments. But for the most part, I could participate in normal everyday things,
Yeah.
school, sleepovers. And I was very lucky where none of the kids in my class really looked at me as the sick kid. It was just like, "Oh, Erin is the girl who just has to do like 50 treatments before she comes over to her house to eat pizza, right? And go to Blockbuster or whatnot." Probably dating myself with that reference. But, anyways, I made it to 18 years old and I thought, wow, I can't believe I'm going to make it past 18 and then
Yeah.
20. And I thought, how can I keep that promise to that 5-year-old? So I
Oof.
started to give keynote talks in honor of her, in honor to myself, to be able to share whatever wisdom I have learned about living with that expiration date. And I wanted my message to be that you don't need a crisis to change everything. You just need to know how to live in the moment. And I had a framework that I would teach during my talks called DASH. I could talk about that too if you want, but it
Please.
was just my way to dash. Okay, so I would explain this as, so there's always this dash in between two dates of our lives,
Yep.
right? The day you're born, and of course, the day you pass. But what we do with that dash in between, that's on
Is
us.
everything. Yeah.
It's our legacy. So it was a framework to get people to decide what they want. Don't wait for a crisis to get clear. I wanted these audiences yesterday and today to ask themselves, what will still matter at the end of my dash?
Mm.
Then act before you feel ready.
Yeah.
What's one bold move you've been avoiding? And then take action on that and stack the reps. Now, listen, most reps will not be perfect,
Right.
but we fall on our face, right? We face plant.
Right.
But rejection, failure is just data. Like, use it to recalibrate, to get what you want. And I truly believe how we get what we want are habits. Habits build legacies. So that was my message, and almost like this gift to the world that I could give when I didn't know how much time that I had left.
Yeah. What was the age?
The age when I went into end stage.
No, no, the H for the dash.
Habits, habits.
Habits. Got it. Okay. Got it. Got
Yes,
it.
yep.
We'll cut
Yeah,
this part
habits.
out. Okay. Got
Okay,
it.
yeah, yes, yes. If that makes sense, yes, yeah.
No, it makes total sense. What do healthy people fundamentally misunderstand about living with a life-threatening illness?
They always think they have more time. They're gonna do it tomorrow. They're gonna do it next week. They're gonna do it next year. They're not ready yet. What I would challenge those folks is I want them to picture their 80th birthday, their 85th
Mm,
birthday. Picture themselves blowing out a candle. What would they regret on their 81st birthday that they never tried or never accomplished? And I want them to take that and do it or try it now.
yeah. Yeah. Do you ever feel like you have to make other people comfortable around talking about your illness, or do you try to minimize it, or do you just stay positive? Do you ever feel pressure around discussing it?
It's a good question. I don't think so because it's always been my identity. And I don't mean that in a
Yeah.
weird way, like leveraging it. I think I wanted to be a messenger of hope. And it's not the first thing I lead with when I meet someone new. It
Right.
might be in my business world for keynote speaking and coaching and whatnot, sure. But as an everyday person, if I just met you having a margarita and we were in a group of friends, I want to be like, hey, Robin, so I was end life stage. I have a terminal illness.
Right.
No, of course not. I like to have fun. Okay. So, but
Yeah.
I think it's also made me connect with people in such a way where people feel safe around sharing their
Mm,
own struggles with me once I do open up and share. And I feel like that's a gift that someone can feel a psychological safety in that. And maybe it's not themselves who are going through a health crisis, or it doesn't have to be health, some sort of uncertainty. Maybe it's a friend, family member, aging parent. And I'm honored that they feel comfortable and safe enough to share that with me.
yeah. Wow, you're right. That is absolutely a gift. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Were you ever angry? So, like, not just the
Yeah.
grief, but angry that your life was being negotiated against a clock that you never agreed to?
Of course. Yes. So there was a lot of anger, a lot of why me? Of course. I didn't want that though to take away from everything cystic fibrosis and this disease gave to me. So what I would do is I would think about that anger, that fear, that why me, and I would let myself maybe have a pity party for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I would have a little journal, like almost like a worry book that I would write that down in, and I would close it. And that worry, that anger, that fear would stay in there until I had to
Mhm.
reopen it again. And I think it's just, compartmentalizing that, not letting you get stuck, but also honoring the fact that, listen, human beings are messy. We can have
Right.
emotions. And I think a lot of times with people going through illness, especially maybe public figures like me speaking about it, sharing your story, it's a lot of grit and you can do anything, just keep going. And respectfully, I don't really agree with that. I think we have to practice a practical resilience
Yeah.
because if I said to you, no, I never was angry, I was never upset. Well, what happens if you or someone else listening to this podcast starts going through a really
Yeah.
difficult time, a health challenge, and then they start feeling those emotions? And then they're beating themselves up because they heard, Erin and Robin talking about how you can just keep going. Don't give up. You're going to have days when you want to give up. And guess what? That's okay. You just
Yeah.
can't stay in that place.
Yeah. You just mentioned that cystic fibrosis gave you things. What were they?
It gave me these meetings like you and I, these conversations of people that I never thought I would get to meet. It
Yeah.
gave me gratitude for the little things like waking up in the morning, a home cooked meal, the love I felt and supported from my friends, from my husband. It has given me my perspective on life that I don't think I would ever have had if I didn't have this disease. I feel like the luckiest unlucky person in a way because it has taught me what the meaning of life really is. And I think it's just to leave this world better and each other than when we found it.
Yeah. So when you and I met last week, you have a mantra that you pull up on your phone every day. Can you share that?
Yes, absolutely. So on one of my sickest nights, when I wasn't sure if I would make it to the morning, I ended up renaming the alarm clock on my phone. Like on the iPhone, you have like a label on your alarm. And I simply changed it to 4 words. You woke up today. It was a reminder for me, if I woke up and I got to see those words, I may get to live another 24 hours. And I was going to make them count. It became a promise that no matter how uncertain my future felt, I would not waste a day that was given.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
powerful. So when
And
we were,
that's, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So it sets this intention every morning before you get out of bed. It's the first thing you see, and it's priming. It's not just fluff, right? There's research
No.
that backs that up, as you
Yeah,
know, to be able to see that and reset going into the day. So that's the first thing I still see every single morning. I've never changed it.
that's incredible. I love
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
at 33, you walk into your doctor's office and you're showing up with research and studies and all of this possibility, still fighting for your life.
Mhm.
Take us into that appointment and tell our listeners what happened.
Absolutely. So at 33, my lungs were failing fast. Every day it felt like I was breathing through a straw.
Oof.
And I was immune to all oral and IV antibiotics because of the years and years of taking them for constant infections. And I was desperate to find something just to give me another year or two to live, even another month to live. Well, with this research that I brought, my doctor in the middle of the conversation cut me off and said, "Don't get emotional, but I'm the expert. If I thought it were worth trying, I would be the one to suggest it." Then he said something I'll never forget, Robin. You should feel lucky for all the extra years you had. You should feel good about that.
What
And
happened inside you when he said all of that?
that fight, that drive, that gratitude, it dimmed. My
Mm,
hope dimmed. I wanted to be relentlessly hopeful. And in that moment, it felt like the world stopped.
sure.
And the person you're relying on, the one person
That you should
who's
be able to trust.
exactly, that you think do no harm, right? Isn't that the
Right.
doctor oath? Was doing massive harm.
Yeah.
And listen, it wasn't that I was rose colored glasses. I knew my prognosis. I wasn't
Right.
asking for things that were unreasonable. I just wanted even an open conversation about to try some
Sure.
different antibiotic combinations, treatments. Robin, I wanted someone to fight for me the way I was
Yeah.
fighting for myself, but I was exhausted. I couldn't breathe. I would walk from sometimes my bed to the bathroom and I would have to stop along the way to catch my breath. I was so fragile and such a hard time to have someone take hope away,
Yeah.
especially who is a doctor, is detrimental.
Do you think that changed the way you viewed the healthcare system?
At that time, yes. However, what happened next also changed the way I viewed it.
So let's go into that for a minute. So go into
Okay.
New York City.
Okay. So what I will say is I got in my car, I remember in the parking garage. I won't say where. I don't want to call out the hospital and broke down. You know that scene in the movie when you're like yelling at the main character to get up, like find another way. You're like yelling
Yeah.
at Rocky Balboa. You know what he needs to do. And
Right.
I thought, this time, this voice is coming from inside my own head. So I went home. I called every cystic fibrosis clinic I could drive to, like any that would take my insurance. A couple weeks later, I walked into Dr. Patricia Walker's office in New York City, in Manhattan, and she read my chart. She looked me in the eye and said, "I can't promise anything," which I knew,
Right.
"but I'll try everything I can. I won't give up on you." And for the first time, I had a doctor who believed my voice mattered. just as
Yeah.
much as theirs. And it flipped for that healthcare
Mm.
system to have that partner in care and being heard. We are so dismissed. Whether it
Right.
happens in an exam room or a boardroom, being dismissed feels the same. But in healthcare, that kind of dismissal isn't inconvenient, it's deadly.
Yeah. How often do you think women silence themselves in medical settings because they're afraid of being labeled emotional or difficult or dramatic?
More than you think. There was a recent study, I think it was about 93% of women have said they felt dismissed by their provider.
Mm.
And more than half said it's delayed their diagnosis or made their condition worse. I think it's on the rise, especially with menopause.
Right.
Women are constantly being told that, how they're feeling is normal or they're overreacting. I think older populations are being dismissed as well for what they're feeling and their medical issues. Say, well, you're just getting old. No,
Right.
there is more to the story, and you need a provider to listen to you. But more than that, you need a provider that's part of a system that encourages that patient centric care. Because if they don't have the resources, they don't have the nurses, the care teams to be able to support you, you're also in a lot of trouble. The provider is only one person.
Right.
It needs to be surrounded by a group. But I do believe the head of those departments, that starts with them. That culture starts with them.
When you and I were talking last week, you gave a phrase, and I don't remember what it is, that they can literally label you in your chart for being,
Yes.
quote, difficult. Share what that is and educate our
Yeah.
listeners on what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. This was new to me too. I was actually doing a wellness day for a team at West Virginia University Medical Center. And I had a doctor say to me there after hearing my talk that if they mark you non compliant in your chart, that can travel with you and be detrimental to your care. So, for example, for me, if I got to the point where I needed a lung transplant, and that doctor marked me non-compliant, I could be ineligible for that lung transplant. I could be ineligible for new treatments because I was marked non-compliant. It can be a death sentence for someone to be marked that way because it travels. And I confirmed that actually with my current incredible doctor, if those things are true. And she said, yeah, absolutely.
And non-compliant being that when he said, "I'm the expert, if I thought this would work, I would have recommended it." You need to
Yeah,
basically go along with their recommendations because, quote, "they're the expert." And if you don't,
100%.
they could mark you as such.
From what I understand, yes.
Jeez.
I mean, and hopefully people like that who do that, those providers and doctors are few and far between. But I
Yeah, for
think it's an
sure.
important message for your listeners to
Yeah.
know. And I think I don't want to also have them feel not encouraged to advocate and speak up because they would be fearful of that. So that's not what I'm saying either. I think what I mean by that is making sure also you're getting a second opinion. Knowledge is
Yeah.
power, clarity is power. Know what you're dealing with, know the consequences, and do not be afraid to get a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, right? So
Right.
keep fighting for yourself. And you don't have to deal with somebody who is not fighting for you, who is not listening. You will find a doctor, like I found one, that will fight for you. I'm not saying it's easy, especially when we're sick, stressed. I had about 35% lung function. I could barely breathe,
Wow.
but I had one life. I had that dash. I needed to keep that dash going as long as possible.
Yeah. So you've described entering end stage disease at 35 years old. How
Mhm.
close were you to dying?
So it's interesting with cystic fibrosis. So end life stage is I think I was 79 pounds. I
Oh
was
my
using some
gosh,
oxygen to
Erin.
help me. I was so fragile. I was so
Wow.
fragile. Yeah. And what happened was with me personally, everybody with cystic fibrosis is a little different, even though we share the same disease.
Yeah.
What transpires in our bodies can be different. I had something called hemoptysis. That was a huge issue. I was coughing up blood every single
Mm.
day, and my
Wow.
lungs were so damaged. And it could have been one wrong cough with my low lung function that could have spiraled into an embolism and took me out because of
Wow.
that end stage disease and my illness. So it's hard to say to put a timeline, right?
Yeah.
Was I a week, month, whatnot? There's also sometimes if you can get a transplant, wasn't sure about that at that time with the hemoptysis and everything going on. So it's hard to say, but I was very close to passing away.
What do you remember about the version of yourself who was slipping away?
She was at peace. She was
Mm.
at peace because she knew she did everything she could to live.
Yeah. So, right about that time, this breakthrough drug arrives, thank God.
Thank
And
God.
6 years later, you're still here, thank God.
Thank God.
How do you even emotionally process surviving something that you weren't supposed to survive?
Can I tell you, it was not easy at first. I was preparing to wrap things up. And
Yeah.
suddenly, I needed a 401k, a LinkedIn strategy. Like I was like SPF in my moisturizer. Robin, I'm like, you people have been living like this your whole life? Like this is very stressful. It was this relief, of course, but also a little confusion because that expiration date that followed me around since I was 5 was gone.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do with myself. And you don't have to go through what I have to recognize that feeling. For you or your listeners, it could be a role, a goal, a season of life that suddenly has disappeared. And you might be left wondering, what now? And there's something in psychology called identity foreclosure. And it's when we cling so tightly to who we are, we
Mhm.
can't imagine who we could be. But for me, what I realized after some soul searching and these new options, decisions that I could make, everything I needed to live in this next phase to really live, I had already learned while dying.
What does self advocacy mean for you today?
Self advocacy is not taking no for an answer. It could be need to keep looking and can mean next opportunity.
Yeah.
It can mean that you believe in yourself. There are many ways that self advocacy can manifest. But I think at the end of the day, it's the power to use your voice, even if your voice shakes.
Yeah. What advice would you give to women who they know something's wrong in their bodies and
Mhm.
they're being dismissed or minimized or being told that they're overreacting? What advice would you give them?
I want them to remember SOS, that they're going to send out an SOS, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to
Yep.
walk you through it. S means say it out loud. I want them to leave with the words, this is not normal for me.
Mm.
It takes all emotion out and puts the facts up front. Naming what's wrong is the first act of advocacy. O is for open your notes. Because as we were saying, when you're stressed, sick, overwhelmed, your brain misses details.
Right.
Like write it down or record it. And if you are in a doctor's office, ask if it's okay to use one of those AI recording apps if you
Mm.
need, so you can look back on the conversation later. That clarity is power. And the last S is for support. I want people to make sure they are bringing someone with them to appointments to back them up. And if
Mm.
they don't have anyone, hear me when I say there are patient advocates that exist in the healthcare system. Most people don't know that they can ask. And if all else fails, if anybody takes anything from this conversation today, I want them to use the most powerful sentence in medicine. I'd like a second opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, how do we teach women to trust themselves again in systems that condition them not to?
I think they have to believe in themselves. They have the tools that they need.
Mm.
How do they do that? I think it's that positive, right? Self-talk is by building a support system
Yeah.
around them of advocates. Sometimes we need others. We need others to lift us up, whether we're unsure of ourselves, whether we're sick, that we're overwhelmed. We need that support system. A lot of times, when we talk about advocating or going through challenges, we talk about it as an individual pursuit.
Mm.
But we were never meant to face challenges individually. We need each other. For example, this is so basic, but we're on a plane and turbulence hits, right?
Yeah.
What's the number one thing people do besides grip the armrest?
Right.
They look at each other, right? I look at the flight attendant. Is she calm? Is she still
Right.
serving pretzels? Right? We look at the person next to us. If they're calm, scrolling on their phone, sipping their drink, something in us relaxes.
Uh-huh.
It's called
Uh-huh.
co regulation. Like before we get emotional, we look to someone else's nervous system to borrow stability from.
Yeah.
And I truly believe creating a network of friends or support system helps that. It's also social buffering is important, right? Like we believe help is nearby, our outcomes will be more favorable.
Mm.
If not, well, obvious, we don't think the outcome is going to be as great. But I think that's all that to say is you have to have a support system in place. And if you don't have one, there are groups you can go to. And I think that gives you the power to
Yeah.
advocate and believe in yourself. What do you think, Robin? Do you agree? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we're not meant to take this journey by ourselves. We're just
Mhm.
not. Yeah. So at 41, what does life mean to you now?
Possibility.
Mm.
I am keeping that promise to myself. And did some soul searching with all these bonus years that I get to have. And I think that's why now more than ever, this advocacy and the speaking that I'm doing, whether it's at conferences, companies, just women's groups in general, means a lot because I want to have people hear my message so they can believe in themselves, so they don't have to wait for a crisis to change everything. And more than that, really get through these uncertain, challenging times, whether it's in the workplace or their
Yeah.
personal lives. Like uncertainty is one of the biggest stressors we are all dealing with, no
It
matter
is.
what subject, right? And so that's my message. And I think being a shepherd to help others is what I meant to do and why I get to have so much more time here on this earth.
Well, that is a beautiful place to stop. Erin, thank you so, so much. This was incredible. For our listeners, Erin also has an incredible TEDx talk that we will put in the show notes. You've got to go listen to it. It's phenomenal. Erin, thank you so much.
Robin, so good to be with you. Thank you so much. Grateful for you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you back next time. Take care.
Bye.
If this conversation awakened something in you, pay attention to that. Audacity isn't reserved for a select few. It's a decision made in moments when conviction demands action. If this episode moved you, I invite you to follow the show and be part of amplifying women who are changing the world across cultures, continents, and systems of power. This is the Audacity Tapes. Until next time, choose courage.